What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to White Sox Daily. Once again, I'm Aaron Feely. As the White Sox, not a great deal of news for you thus far here today, but we'll jump into a few of the nuggets we did get from the Chicago White Sox and from across baseball and how that'll impact the White Sox. And one of the few things that is White Sox specific was new pitcher Sean Newcomb's quote from earlier on today, where he said his primary goal this year is to be able to start as many games as possible, which certainly raised quite a few eyebrows because start? I'm not sure that many of us knew that that was entirely in the plan or that that was going to be something that was on the table here. But Newcomb, a guy that was brought in from the Athletics and then also spent some time with Boston last season where he was a really good reliever for much of the year. Didn't really start all that many games for most of the last 7 years. Single digit game, hasn't started more than 5 in any given season since 2018. Well, that was kind of the last time he was a full-fledged starter for any team. Back in his Atlanta days, he was a starter his first 2 seasons with them in 2017 and 2018. And then he's been more of a relief pitcher, a bullpen guy ever since. He's been a really solid bullpen guy. And so it was kind of just expected that he would continue to thrive in that role until his comments today, where he mentioned what his primary goal was for the season. And I think that's definitely a head scratcher for a lot of us White Sox fans, for a lot of media pundits as well, that were trying to figure out if that was just some sort of figure of speech in sporting sense, as in he'll be there for a certain number of games. But I mean, when you're a pitcher, you certainly know what it means to say, I plan to start games. So yeah, we'll have to see what comes of that. Sean Newcomb claiming that that is his primary goal for this season, start as many games as possible. We'll have to see if anything actually comes of that. If he really does mean that he's about to be a significant portion of the starting rotation, or just available to start some games in spots like he's been doing in previous years. Usually, most seasons he's been in the league, he'll get 4 or 5 starts here and there between Atlanta, Boston, and Oakland. But yeah, he hasn't really been like a real every 5 days type of starter since 2018. So it would be really wild to even consider that that would possibly be on the table. But we never know. Came out of his own mouth. So let us know in the comment section below how you'd feel about Sean Newcomb potentially making the jump up to the starting rotation for the White Sox this year. As we'll dive then right into the next topic here, Justin Tucker's offers are starting to come in. He has narrowed it down to 2 teams. It sounds like the New York Mets have the more lucrative short-term deal. They have offered to Tucker $55 million per year. But the Toronto Blue Jays currently offering a longer deal to Kyle Tucker. And now that the big fish looks like he's about to go ahead and make a decision any day now between those 2 teams, there should be a certain ripple effect that comes from this that trickles down to where the White Sox are in the general market that they're currently dipping their toes in with outfielders. Kyle Tucker signing for potentially $55 million a year. Could that potentially, cause a bit of outfielder inflation as far as some of the guys that would have been more affordable for the White Sox previously? We've talked about a number of the options on this channel before. We've brought it up pretty much every single week that this channel's been up. The different outfielders that are still available. Austin Hayes is out there. A couple of different guys we talked about recently. A potential trade for Nick Castellanos, which is starting to feel like potentially the best actual option for the White Sox. Max Kepler went and got himself suspended. He's out. Some of these other guys are going to get more expensive now because of the Kyle Tucker signing. So they could potentially be out if you go and make a trade for someone. You could potentially trade one of these catchers after all of their recent signings. And see if you can get an outfielder in return at Castellanos, a guy that can certainly fill that role for a year or two, bring some power, bring some experience, some veteran leadership to the outfield, and a guy that's going to cost exactly what he costs. You imagine the White Sox will have to take on a decent chunk of his current $20 million per year salary. But considering that it is a salary dump move that we expect from the Philadelphia Phillies, you could also expect they might take some of it on themselves. And yeah, so just some things to consider here for the White Sox outfielder-wise. Kyle Tucker's signing certainly will have a ripple effect throughout the market going forward. And speaking of some roster construction, the Chicago Cubs, big time news for them coming out of Saturday. It was a big time event all through the weekend for the entire city of Chicago. Feels like Chicago sports had themselves quite a Saturday apart from the White Sox. But one thing that might relate to the Chicago White Sox here that we might be able to keep our eye on is, are the Chicago Cubs currently laying the blueprint? And I know that feels like blasphemy to speak of, to talk about how we as the White Sox want to follow in the Cubs' footsteps in any capacity, considering the older brother complex those Cubs fans seem to already possess. You never want to give them more ammo. But in this particular sense, it's safe here. We've got a nice safe space to talk amongst like-minded individuals, right? Let's speak on this one. Are the Cubs laying the perfect roster construction blueprint for the modern age of baseball right in our own neighborhood? I mean, they went out and they signed a guy like Bregman over the weekend to add to some of their other big free agents in Dansby Swanson, in Jamison Talon. Added on top of that, the guys that they've drafted, brought in through their minor league system. It's about a third. You got PCA, you got Ian Happ, Nico Horner, Matt Shaw, guys like that the Cubs have pretty much raised up themselves. And then also dipping nicely into that foreign market, particularly over in Japan, where they brought in Saya Suzuka and Shota Imanga. And that's sort of the direction that the White Sox feel like they are trying to go, especially with their new head of Japanese scouting that they made an official role this year. And certainly showing off a team that formerly was criticized so often for not spending money, finally embracing their large market role and going out and paying for some of these free agents to construct approximately 1/3 of their roster. And I feel like that's doing wonders for the Chicago Cubs and has got a lot of the excitement very high for them this coming year, which we can all fully expect will be trounced somewhere around early October, probably at the hands of the Milwaukee Brewers. It's just kind of what is there to be done. But, for the White Sox, we don't have the Milwaukee Brewers over here, so that certainly won't be an issue. And hopefully we're just not as cursed as they are. We'll have to see what happens. We certainly feel like we are, but I'm not really sure if it's a curse or just general ineptitude for the most part. But especially with the upcoming ownership change coming up, the Ishaba brothers taking over, you expect that there will be a lot more spending once they are in majority control of the team. And yeah, you'd like to think that this would be the general blueprint that they might follow. Keep some of these guys that we're so excited for, the Colson Montgomerys, the Kyle Teals, some of these guys coming up, Noah Schultz, other, Braden Montgomery, guys like that, to construct a majority of the core. And then you want to get about 2-3 major free agents in here, and then add on top of that you've now dipped into that Japanese market, bring in some of these international signings. You've already got Murakami, who factors to be potentially your top player in 2026, depending on, how he kind of plays out and whether or not Colson Montgomery continues to just skyrocket with each passing month, it feels like. And yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about there with the Chicago Cubs, how that fits itself into White Sox news. And speaking of other Chicago teams, we'll end things off here with the discussion on how soon is too soon to start looking around at what's been going on pretty much since the Pope was sworn in, or the Pope was elected. The first ever American Pope came from Chicago, a South Sider in his own right. Suddenly, it's become this instantaneous snap of the fingers. Man, okay, apparently Chicago's capable of turning stuff around pretty quickly. I know the Blackhawks kind of fell off the wagon just a little bit after Connor Bedard got hurt. That was unfortunate. They were truly, truly, truly atrocious without him, but now he's back. You never know. It could still turn this back around, start playing like they were pre-injury with Bedard. They might claw their way back into a playoff spot. The Chicago Bulls factor to be exactly where they've always been forever. So actually, bad example, never mind. But the Cubs go out and they sign Bregman. Big offseason for them. The Chicago Bears, I mean, what more even needs to be said about what's going on with them this season? They just knocked the Green Bay Packers out of the playoffs with a franchise-altering and record-breaking 18-point comeback on Saturday. Arguably, for those of you that are not 40 years old or older, you could argue that was the greatest win that you've ever seen as a Chicago Bears fan. And I'm even counting for myself the NFC Championship game from 2006. I mean, it was just absolutely stupendous. And you start to wonder, I mean, that was basically a 1-year rebuild. You bring in a new coach, you bring in the new quarterback. Now for the White Sox, you got a brand new manager. You've got some hot young talent. You've got a big time free agent you just went out and signed. Is it too soon to start thinking? I mean, you're not thinking, I'm going to put money down that this is a contender, but maybe just from the aspect of, am I allowed to feel a little hope? Just a little bit of naive hope going into this year that maybe you could compete for a wild card spot or battle it out for what projects to be a potentially weak American League Central, something like that. I say, why not at this point? I think there's a precedent that's been set now that, crazy things happen in sports. The Chicago White Sox, could they be capable of at least making a climb up to kind of pitter-patter around 80 to 90 wins? Probably not. But why not? I mean, after seeing what's been going on across Chicago this year, I'd say let's all let ourselves hope. The pessimism in Chicago, let's leave that in the past. It looks like maybe it could be time to let us break our own hearts once again as Chicago sports fan. And isn't that just a wonderful time? But that'll do it for today's episode. I've been Aaron Feely. This has been White Sox Daily. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.